I'm pleased to introduce Eric Milligan, who is an avid forager. He's been doing this for about 20 years, and 10 years into it, decided to turn his hobby into a profession, and he founded the New Hampshire Mushroom Company. And I understand that they converted an unused building up in Tamworth, New Hampshire, and created a bunch of microclimates in it for the different kinds of mushrooms that they are growing. One of my questions is whether they're going to start growing morel mushrooms that would apparently you can grow them now, and they may become as common as button mushrooms. But they also run foraging workshops and have worked with the New Hampshire governmental authorities on obtaining qualification to be able to forage and sell mushrooms, which is an important thing in a variety of jurisdictions. And I thought he could talk a little bit about that as well. But I think it would be really interesting for us to hear about how mushrooms are grown and what it takes in order to actually serve as a vendor of mushrooms. So Eric, if you want to share your screen, you can tell us a little bit about the background of your company as well as how you came to be doing this. Good.
But now I can't see anybody. Oh, that's me. Hello, my name's Eric Milligan. I'm the primary owner of New Hampshire Mushroom Company. It's our 10-year anniversary this year. Seems like yesterday and about 1,000 years ago all at the same time. We're in a 5,000 square foot building in, as I said, Tamworth, New Hampshire, and we produce right around 1,000 pounds of mushrooms a week, every week, year round. But not just mushrooms. For eating, we also teach a lot, or I teach a lot with different types of mushroom identification, medicinal mushrooms, cooking classes, ID classes. We do this year we upped it. Every year we upped our education a little bit. Now we have like Friday foraging every Friday night, and then we have Sundays we have it's called the Can You Eat It class, because that's the one you get all the time. And usually people get surprised because we introduce people to a lot of the people who take our classes have never foraged before. So it's pretty exciting to get people interested in the hobby. And then they realize they really couldn't eat a lot of what they found. So we make them a great big lunch. All mushroom themed. And it's been really popular. Hit enter. Yeah. And so what's really been interesting is being in the farm has been, 10 years now. We've had to pivot based on sort of what the industry has been. So there was only about 23 mushroom farms in the country that were small specialty farms when we started. And boy, there's a lot more now, probably 100 or more. I tried to stay offline because then I second guess how I grow mushrooms. If anyone's ever here in Tamworth on a Sunday, I do a free tour of the facility every Sunday at noon. And I was one of the first farms that said, hey, anyone want to learn how to do this? Come on in, I'll show you how to do it. It's really tough though. And so many people are getting into it, and especially realizing that for specialty mushrooms, having small farms with local distribution is a lot better for product and for people that are buying them, sort of right to your end user. We have found, over the last 10 years that selling mushrooms to large like box stores that have like 1% margins, it's hard to produce volume on a small scale with the quality that we want to produce. So we hand deliver everything. We don't ship anything. And over the years, we're getting less and less wholesale and more retail to our regular customers. It's always been a goal to get people to eat more mushrooms. We even sell T-shirts that say that on it. To have people with, having mushroom-based proteins, and then opening the doors to educate I mean, we started it wasn't just to get someone to try and eat lion's mane, it was to get them to buy it every week and then to tell their friends about it. And I got thinking about that, statement a couple of weeks ago, and it hit me when I was at the Concord farmers market on a Saturday morning, and there's lots of folks walking by, and two kids, the brother's about 10 and the sister's about 8, and they walk by the mushroom table, and the boy goes, "Oh, they've got lion's mane. We're getting lion's mane. It's my favorite. We're getting lion's mane today." And the sister goes, "No, it's my week. We're getting chestnuts. They have chestnuts in stock. We're getting chestnuts this week." And then they argued and bickered back and forth. And I kind of thought it funny that, 10 years ago, I would not have seen these. Well, they weren't born yet, but you wouldn't see a couple of kids walking at the farmer's market, arguing over which specialty mushroom they wanted to eat. And so that was kind of a feather in our cap as to regards to, okay, maybe we are making a difference in having people, eat these on a regular basis. Our big thing for our cooking class is really treating people, getting people to treat mushrooms like animal proteins, especially when cooking them. And so that's opened up the door for a lot of people to realize, this is a protein source being more like meat than a vegetable, and opening up our doors for people to come through and showing them the entire process. We're growing a wood-based substrate, red oak sawdust, and soybean hulls. However, we've recently been running some trials on hemp hurd, just based on sustainability. I also wanted a great big greenhouse to passively grow mushrooms outside, but I don't qualify because I'm a mushroom farmer. And I don't have any mushrooms outside right now other than what Mother Nature grew, which was lots and lots of matsutake this week, which is always nice. And so I got that farm hemp certified this year, and we have a very, I can't really call it a crop. I don't think there's enough to test, but we have next year, we're growing some genetics. I'm trying to promote a hemp company that started 2 years ago that are doing some really good sort of farming practices with no-till, regenerative growth, carbon trapping, all sorts of things. And so I wanted to help promote his company. And then New Hampshire is sort of unique in regards to its cannabis legislation with, it sits happily on an island of prohibition, but that makes it very, very easy for me to qualify and to grow hemp. And one of the things that we've done this year is by having hemp on the apron, being able to strike up a conversation with our customers now about, CBD and mushroom extracts, only because, we've been asked for 10 years. I mean, it's the question you get asked every day is whether or not, we grow psychotropics, which, of course we don't have them. We don't grow them. I got a t-shirt that says, "I don't have them. I don't grow them. I can't find you any." Because you get it asked every day. But 10 years ago, it's a bunch of people that would be like, "Hey, you got them funny mushrooms going to a concert." But now it's sort of like, "Hey, my Nana's in hospice. I heard about something," or, depression and this sort of thing. So it's kind of cool that the conversation has started. And so also having talks about things that people have always been afraid of. And
Eric,
I get lots of calls. Myself, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Eric, you on occasion you're freezing. You might, if your internet is getting overloaded, perhaps close your video and you can just talk over your PowerPoint when you start to do that. Every once in a while,
Alex,
you're
the general
dropping
manager, he put the PowerPoint together to keep me on track, but he should know better. That didn't really do much.
You
So the first
might
picture,
not have
there's our logo. All right, there's me cooking at various weights, between almost fat and really fat. All right, so the next slide was that mushroom school. So many more people want to get into farming, and let me know, am I cutting out now? Is there some sort of?
Yeah, I think that doing video in addition to the PowerPoint, you might be overloading your broadband. So
So I'm gonna
if that
stop.
continues
I'll-
to happen, you might just click the button down the bottom left-hand corner to stop your video, but you'll still have your screen share. And so you can just talk over it. You see you've frozen again there. Yeah. Yes, do that. Now go back to screen share.
That should work now.
It looks exactly the same.
Yeah, it's going to.
Right,
Can it-
and go
can it-
to slideshow to zoom it out.
Yep.
Is that the button?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for it to load.
Yes, good.
Perfect.
All right.
That's
Cool.
great.
All right. So after 10 years of being in business, I hired a general manager. It's about the best thing you can ever do. Anything that requires a piece of paper, a dollar bill, or any sort of responsibility now is firmly on his plate. All right. Did I crack up there at all? Can you hear me all right?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, great. So myself, we started 10 years ago, but there was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 companies that all started a year apart after that, all in New England. And we all do something or have done something different than the other guy. And so really, we've all been able to help each other succeed in business by helping each other out. We had stopped really wanting to hide all of these sort of secrets about cultivation, to the vest. And we realized none of us would live long enough to actually figure it all out. And that we all did a lot better by sharing our information, and, this week, I sell mushrooms to a mushroom farmer, and, I picked up mushrooms I bought while I was there. And so that being said, it's really allowed us to make our distribution circles or our distribution networks a lot smaller, which is great. Not as many miles on little vans. So before I get to HB 345, which is kind of a nice feather in our cap in regards to things that we've been able to accomplish in the last decade, getting the farm hemp certified was a sort of a three-part plan. The first was to have extracts of CBD, CBN, and CBGA with different anti-inflammatory medicinal mushrooms, which aren't being done a lot. And we've partnered with over in Maine that's going to help us with those extracts. Also a fiber plant out of Switzerland, which I think will grow oysters a lot better than red oak will, given the lignaceous nature, even more of the hemp. And so we've run some trials with some hemp farmers and with really some nice results. But in order to get enough of the stock on hand, I got the farm certified, and next year we'll have a nice crop as another side business or a type C product, whatever you want to call it. And so let me kind of jump quickly to HB 345. I think it's like 4 years now. I don't know, there's a couple of years there where everything got blurry. One of our state representative, Jerry Kinnerk, him and his wife buy mushrooms at the Tamworth Farmers Market almost every week. And we had wild mushrooms on the table, as I have whenever we have wild mushrooms. And he said, "Oh, what are these? Oh, the chicken of the woods. Oh, I've never seen these before. Did you cultivate them?" Well, no, I'm not supposed to sell wild mushrooms, but Eric does anyway. Wild mushrooms are not an approved food, and because there wasn't a state expert. So technically, it was kind of like a gray area law in regards to whether or not I would be allowed to sell wild mushrooms. They said someone would need to know what they are. And I said, "Well, who would you call?" And they said, "Well, we'd call you because you're the one that knows what." So that I kind of got it through on that gray area. We did have restaurants, have had to throw many hundreds of dollars of mushrooms away because they weren't an approved food. I ID mushrooms for people 7 days a week, which means I pay a lot of money in insurance. And it became a food safety issue as well, because I want to be able to market wilds. What I don't like to do, and if it only happened once or twice, it wouldn't be a problem, but it's happened a lot and happens more frequently now, is that foragers will, come to my farm because I buy wild mushrooms from people and will sell their leftovers that they didn't sell to restaurants. Of which, I mean, the last time was 9 species. Six of them, all 9 were inedible, really, and 3 of them were toxic. One being he wanted to sell the leftover Porcinis he had. They were bracelet quartz, and so I explained to him that it was a bracelet quart, and he wanted to know what the difference between a Porcini and a Cornarius was. And I started with the fact that Cornarius had gills. I didn't have to go much further, but he had albino chicken, which was cheese polypore, and he also had a lion's mane, which was a Ramaria. So I kind of, asked him what restaurants, and then called all the restaurants he sold to and told them, God, I hope you haven't served anybody yet. So Jerry Knurk hears these stories and comes to me at the farm and says, well, what do you need? And I'd been thinking about this for quite some time, and kind of gave him a list of things that, would be required. And now 4 years later, the season was supposed to, the training and the certification was supposed to happen this summer. Getting web stuff up, it's kind of delayed a little bit, but we will get there. So I was trying to determine whether I think that some of the training is going to be done here at the farm. One of the first slides was the New Hampshire Mushroom School. After cultivating for 10 years, I've spent a lot of money like figuring out how to do things. And if I wanted to be a million mushroom farms, instead of having a million mushrooms, having people not make all of the errors that I make going through, and be able to get a jump on being able to stay in business. There's a lot of unknowns when you start any business, but mushroom farming can be a bit of a grind, and cost a lot of money. The errors are very expensive. So starting a school, obviously it's for me to diversify ourselves as well. In a post-COVID world, we've pivoted the company again to where, pre-COVID, we were 95% sales to restaurants, and then everybody else the other. And now we're under 30% on restaurants. The industry has bounced back a little bit. Most of the places we go are not open to capacity. So we're talking about, difference in volumes. So they're ordering mushrooms, just not enough, or not, what they had ordered before. So to become the big thing about HB 345 is that it is licensing the commercial harvester of mushrooms. Now, what it defines harvester as is someone that's going to be directly selling to someone that is an end user. So for myself, the farm, we sell wilds, and say I'm at a farmer's market and I'm selling to, a person that's going to take them home and eat. I would need to be certified. Or if I'm the forager, or I'm selling mushrooms to a restaurant and that restaurant's going to serve them, I would need to be certified. And also with, say, a store, a retail store, grocery store, I would need to be certified. Now, the guy up the road, that's been picking wilds for me for the last decade, now he only sells to me. He's one of my neighbors. He does a lot of hiking and picks a lot of wild mushrooms. Now, because he's selling to me, he doesn't need to be certified, because I am, and I'm not the end user. And so that was a little bit of a confusion for, I guess it took like 6 months to get through. But now that we're there, and a couple of exceptions with chaga and things like that, because we want to make sure we don't step on supplements, feet, and all those sort of things. I think it's a pretty good program. And well, now I can legally market wild mushrooms and make more of an effort to go out than selling them on the side. The school itself also gets into identifying with mushrooms, because for anyone to really be able to cultivate year round, it's really important to know what's going on outdoors as well. For example, I'm training mode with a couple of our employees right now, and I took them out mushroom foraging specifically to find a lot of Pholiota species. We grow Foliota adiposa, the chestnut mushroom. And so the conditions were exactly right for its close cousins to grow here. I wanted them to make sure, they go outside. So, using Mother Nature, using, cousin species to become better indoor cultivators. And, open door to literally thousands of people that are getting their first introductions to fungi, especially with our tours. We hear everything from, I thought it was supposed to be dark, or I thought it was supposed to be in a cave, to when do we go to the mushroom fields? Or I could go on and on. But I want to make sure I want to maybe specifically answer questions that people might have, or kind of scroll through here and something I might have missed, Alec.
Yeah, Eric, I have a question for you about this. It sounds like the program that you're describing for certification and sales simply involves somebody who's an intermediary who examines what has been collected and determines that yes, it's appropriate to sell, and then takes the risk associated with that. The $75 cost to be licensed isn't great, but presumably you have a pretty significant insurance issue associated with being a seller under that program. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Given that when I first started actually kind of educating my insurance company as to what mushroom farm entailed, because they really didn't have a protocol to follow on how to insure somebody. And then when we're talking about wild mushrooms and they say, oh, if I touch one, I'm going to die if it's poisonous, you're educating the insurance company, and they get very nervous that I'm going to misidentify something and someone will get pretty sick. So I have an umbrella policy for my entire business, a lot because we have many events here as well, with several thousands of people come throughout the entire year. So it was just good for us to have it. I'm very concerned that a restaurant is going to serve customers a toxic mushroom. All right,
Yeah, of course, that would be a concern, but we always warn people in our club that there's individual sensitivities as well to many of these non-commercial wild collected mushrooms.
And that's where some of the education will come in. I mean, I've actually been in arguments with some mycologists right now. Basically, I was asked to sell a poster of edibles from New Hampshire, and I refused to sell it because I'm not going to recommend people eat any false morel, any gymnopolis species. I'm certainly not going to have people eat, what's the Latin on it? Cornarius, corrugatus, the one, Campbell soup one, the one that goes to renal failure. And so staying up on the education of like what things are still, not edible or still edible, and not selling things that have like consistent sort of intolerances. So I would never ever sell honey mushrooms. Really about maybe about 15 species I would. Nothing that's going to cause any huge issues. In cultivation, the chestnut mushroom that we grow causes more problems than some of the wild sometimes, and some people can't. We've like, many people say, oh, I can't eat those, or they got to be cooked a lot longer than normally you would. So educating, our customer base, makes a lot of them at farmers markets, that the line will educate, the people behind them with like different recipes to try. And so they do our job for us by the time the person comes up to the front. So, yeah. That was my, if you're looking at the pictures, that's the laboratory. That's a positive pressure lab. Those are the bags cooling down, and where we do our inoculation. And here they are incubating. The machine never stops. Pick them 365 days a year. Here we are loading them into a grow room. Here's two of the grow rooms here, vertical farming. So even though the building is only 5,000 square feet, I have almost 1 acre of growing space. And so when I'm working on my yields, and because the mushrooms grow so fast, I actually do my yields based by cubic foot. So how many pounds per cubic foot I can get per 21-day cycle, which is kind of the cycle of a lot of our species. I'm growing 8 right now. We've grown as many as 15, and also constantly running trials. Morels, on your question, I've been reading a little bit on the Danish Morel project. I know that the ones that were cultivated in Michigan and didn't taste good, or people prefer dried. I know that the patent was owned by Kentucky Fried Chicken for some reason. I have no idea. I was working hard on getting oysters to fruit consistently, but I try lots of different species every year, and I fail at them fantastically. But I did just recently get a Sparasis to fruit indoors. Wow, how cauliflower tastes really, really good when there's no dirt and grit or bugs in it. It is a whole new ball game. And so I only got one to fruit, but we did a challenge where we sold them as kits and gave a gift certificate to whoever fruited one first. So we got lots of R&D for free, which was awesome. I actually have a gentleman coming on board at the beginning of November who was only the second person that I ever saw who had successfully fruited chicken of the woods in indoor cultivation. The first person, it had taken about 5 months and got a maybe a quarter of a pound yield on a 5-pound block. This kid gets a 1.25 pound yield on a 5-pound block in 3 weeks on what he's been working on. And so he doesn't have a farm or a lab to run trials. And so I'm going to provide that, and he's going to provide me with labor, which sounds good for me. He's going to take the part that I've been doing. I'm very excited about that. almost giddy. I've been warning everyone I'm taking the month of November off, and they think I'm joking still. It's only been since 2016 that I took a day before. So yeah, the general manager's making faces at me. Let's see. So always trying new ones. Brick tops are on top of my list to grow. I just cultured yesterday. It was go around lion's mane. We got well, technically that's bear's head, but a little more people know it as lion's mane. Blue oysters. We're using genetics out of Belgium now on those. Pleurotus pulmonarius, the phoenix on the bottom left there, and then yeah, that next one that looks like a football, that's the cap of a black pearl oyster. And there's a lot of story around the black pearl oyster, shimmy fury, this or that. It was actually a kid made it. It's a cross between a king oyster, which is extremely difficult to grow consistently, and this blue oyster, which could handle all of the temperatures. So it grows like a blue oyster, but it tastes like a king oyster, which is great for me because, well, I got a king oyster on my logo and they're hard to not get bacteria on them, but they're one of the best. I like to grow mushrooms super cold as well. I try to keep about 57 degrees year round in my grow rooms, many of which they're all tied together. There's 6 grow rooms in the farm, and we pass about 100,000 cubic feet of fresh air through them per hour that we can't recycle. And so given New Hampshire's stable temperatures throughout the year, all 12 seasons, we had some cool inventions to make sure that we can anything from homemade geothermal systems to outdoor wood boilers with zones going to different things. And like I burn 40 quart of wood, but I don't buy wood. I trade, arborists, the town, the state, these are places they pay to get rid of wood. So I just let people drop it off for free. That way I don't have to pay for wood. So we're trying to do things as sustainable as possible. As you see those bags that are on those shelves, I have about 15 pounds of plastic waste per week that cannot be reused or recycled, which is why, is that the end of the show? Oh, end of the show. All right, we'll go back. We haven't released the information yet, but we've been working with fungi and a couple of bacteria actually that digest plastic, which is kind of cool. I've been doing it off and on for probably 5 years. Nothing successful yet to like report on, but there are people out there doing it. I'm not a scientist. I'm a farmer. I studied theater, but it's the same process. I can read books. I was gonna, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Eric. It's Chris
Yeah.
Wozniak. I had a question if you have a moment. I am curious, based on the size of your operation and the variety of different species you're dealing with, do you have issues with contaminating molds like Penicillium, Aspergillus, Trichoderma? Is this all HEPA filtered in these rooms, or
Trichoderma is our most common that we would get. So it's all about process flow in the structure. So, for example, for the first 5 years of business, I was pasteurizing our substrate, and then saw it more and more trichoderm. When the farm is fresh, and brand new, you don't have a lot of molds. And I had a lot of things to learn about mold. Our second week, we had gotten a really bad case of I can't pronounce cotton candy, neurospora. Basically, it looks like cotton candy, and it can shut entire farms down. And is also one of the reasons why Main Cap and Stem have moved from their waste preparation to their huge help and really doing some cool things and selling just substrate blocks to people. So now I sterilize. So I sterilize at 230 degrees. And I keep them there for about 8 hours. And then this is a positive pressure lab. The picture on the right, you can see is a HEPA filter high. The white table on the left-hand side, that's my inoculation spot. And I've got HEPA filter coming in at my feet, and then a laminar flow on the wall. And then the foil tape door is actually the door that led into the concrete chamber that we pasteurized in. It just wasn't very efficient at all. It stored way too much heat. I couldn't add pressure. I couldn't get the bags over 212. And they would take about 3 days to cool down. With this positive pressure lab, the bags are actually literally on the right-hand picture underneath that HEPA filter. That's actually a door that opens. It's a chute. And we roll the racks at 230 right from the autoclave into the laboratory. The blue light, that's a UV light. It's one of those ones that stay in a big housing you're not supposed to take out because it'll burn you. But it works a lot better this way. And they are right. It will burn you. I remember to shut it off now. Also, it makes ozone, which explained why everything tasted funny for about a week. So, yeah, we really don't
appreciate it.
Yeah. So, yeah, positive pressure there. And then by the time they get to the grow rooms, they're pretty much bulletproof. They can take care of themselves. So really trichoderm bread mold from blowing around, but nothing else. Sometimes some bacteria. If you cross flow right,
Eric,
follow a whole bunch of protocols and do it, eliminate your vectors. You can get by. Yep.
Eric, this is John Harper. Could you talk a little bit about, give us an overview of the building that you're operating in and how you outfitting this building or deciding how to
that's actually interesting. So myself and the two founding members, we have 8 owners of the farm. I really wanted to start a mushroom farm, but I had no collateral equity. So I needed to sell the idea, and I sold the idea to about 7 people. And myself and one of the founders once we started, it took about 6 years to write the business plan and really work out the logistics of where we should be. We were in the Lakes region of New Hampshire. My farm was pretty much equidistant from Boston to Portland, Maine to Burlington, Vermont. And plus, this is where we forage. I mean, this is the White Mountains, Mount Washington. I kind of want to live where we play. So how are we going to make a farm work in New England? And I looked at, well, the whole thing's really a direct effect of like hyperfocus ADHD. So I sleep like 3 hours a night, and at night I would engineer different mushroom farms in my head. And so I had lots of different scenarios of how I would grow mushrooms. I worked briefly at a farm after like 6 years of walking around Europe, and learned some of the basics. So I had an idea about, how much you could produce. We looked at 12 different buildings, and none of them worked because it didn't have radiant, it didn't have the square footage, those sorts of things. We happened to look at a piece of land that I thought would be perfect for a farmer's next to a biomass and electricity place. So the power doesn't go out often. So we found out who owned it, and then called them up and asked for a business meeting. And we set it up and sent them a business plan. And they read it and said, "We like the idea. What do you want from us?" And I said, "Well, you got that land. You want to put like a $400,000 building that I can rent from you?" They said no. But they did have this 5,000 square foot building that they were only using for storage. They ran a concrete company and had retired just a few years earlier. So the building itself has 10-inch thick concrete walls, radiant heat throughout, 16-foot high ceilings. And myself and one of the owners, I walked around the empty space and had him write down numbers. And I just kind of ran numbers in my head about incubation space needed, kind of all the things I'd been dreaming, and said, well, this building will work, and this is how many pounds a week we could produce from this building. And we made them part owners to save on a year's rent or some of the year's rent. And this was essentially going to be an R&D facility that we were going to use for 2 years and then upgrade. Again, we're now on year 10, but the farm itself is dialed in, which means if I had all of this equipment in a building across the street, it probably wouldn't work. For small mushroom farms, there really needs to be a heartbeat to the farm. One little thing, goes down, and thousands of dollars of, mushrooms could, go out the window. Conveniently, the picture you're looking at now, to the left of that ladder through that door on the right is my house. I have a studio apartment that I live in here with my dog. So I'm the 24/7 guy. The commute's great. Working from home has its advantages and disadvantages. It's surprising how I can still be late for work every day. But yeah, so we got into this building, and it's a really cool location. I mean, Tamworth it's your battery's running low. We're close enough to the White Mountains to get a lot of demographic, and we're close enough to Boston for a lot of customers coming up through. And we're in an area where, agritourism is a possibility, and offering a free tour on Sundays, because Sunday sales were horrible, had really opened up the door to have a lot of people coming through our building. And because I knew wild mushrooms as well, as a revenue source, teaching people, the more they knew about mushrooms, the more they would eat them. And the goal at the end of the day was to sell people mushrooms and pay bills. That's mostly the GM's concern instead of mine now. I want to be able to be doing more of that, because now with our crew and knowing how the business works, being able to hand over, the day-to-day, so that I can expand on some of these ideas that myself and other mushroom farmers are currently working on and sharing information with. See the two of the things. If I go to, we've had the opportunity, like HB 345 has been awesome to have. Another great thing was working with a grad student, Brendan O'Brien from University of Vermont, who wanted to deal with toxic levels of algae bloom in Lake Champlain. The fungal aspect of decomposition of manure not being addressed, too much is going on the ground. And so he had suggested, or hypothesized, that using spent food waste and spent digester waste as an amendment to this wood-based substrate would be taking and reintroducing the fungal aspect to that decomposition, because the material at the end is this protein-rich, sort of fluffy material that just goes back in as bedding for the dairy industry. And so that loop isn't broken. and he didn't have a farm, so we did all the farms and wrote down the data and dried mushrooms and sent it to him. And he wrote a beautiful paper. I wish I understood more of it. I think the title's the first 3 pages. It's one of those ones where it's got the abstract and read the conclusion. But let's just co-authors on it, and he got it published, which was awesome. And we're hoping down the line here is some of the research that comes out from the in-house studies we've been doing here, the in-house experiments. We just end up doing things. The compost, our waste, is really amazing. It gets better and better. We grew, well, I mean, there's debate over what species it was. We refer to it as the elm oyster. It's, what is it, Hypsozygus or Hypsozygus almarium or almarius, but it's got decurrent gills, but it doesn't taste like an oyster and looks nothing like the elm oyster we have in New England, which is always seems to be bitter. Who knows what it is?
So let me interrupt
I
you
mean,
there.
it tastes good.
You're talking about what we find out in the woods is the elm oyster, but you think you have something that's different than that?
So I purchased, so with genetics of mushrooms, the majority of the species that I picked were, wild 35 years ago. I'm growing clones of them, other than the black pearl being a, hybrid species. The genetics have been kicking around for quite a long time.
Our club has started doing DNA sequencing of the mushrooms that we find, but I'm curious, when you identify something out in the field that you want to try to culture, do you do a sequence on it first to try to figure out what it is or how it relates to what?
I haven't personally, but the person that I'm bringing on board does. Like the things that I have an idea to do is his wheelhouse. And so I can go on to another idea because I'm not sure how it all works, but he does. So I can kind of witness what he's doing and learn from him. And he's excited to have a lab and a paying job to do it. And that's one of the things we've been doing for the last few years is bringing people on that want to have ideas. So the spawn on the elm I get from the Pacific Northwest, and it was always called that, but there was always a debate over what it was. I didn't have it sequenced at all. I kind of discontinued the growth of it this summer. But the kid I have coming on board has been collecting and has a cultural library from his last like 4 or 5 years of foraging. So he has like pages of trials that he wants to try with cultures that he's been nurturing. For a while, and there's a few people that are doing that. So it's more of a generation. Well, there was a whole bunch of people that started like 40 years ago, and they really wanted to like keep all of their genetics and like patent genetics and things like that. None of us are really on that field. I mean, we can just clone a mushroom when we want it. So I mean, it's kind of silly to think that a person could own genetics of something. So we just share it all, and because it just makes us all better mushroom farmers. The widget model doesn't work.
What kind of experiments are you doing? Are those experiments on creating strains or production methods?
For myself, not strains. A lot to do with process flow, how to speed things up, how to get things to fruit more efficiently. One of the big challenges that you have in a small building like this is that all of the species require different incubation temperatures, different CO2 levels, and then by very different parameters in the grow rooms. So in order to grow this many species, you really got to find a balance, a middle point where everything will kind of not be exactly what it wants, but will work for everything. So like red oak will as a growing medium. And so that's kind of where the art form comes in. That's where a lot of the small farms have an individual, like myself, that is always following, the heartbeat, of everything that's going on, because you can manipulate. So, for example, the chestnut mushroom, those are on the higher shelves. Those are the warmer areas for incubation, and being sort of a secondary decomposer. use older sawdust, and I learned the hard way that you got to shock these in order to get them to pin form primordia in the grow room correctly by lowering the temperature of the substrate by about 10 degrees. I had 1,500 incubating in one of our office spaces, and the radiant system broke once, and the room got to 80 degrees, and it was only 40 out. So I opened all the windows, the bags cooled down, and then the next day I looked, and 1,500 bags had little chest mushrooms growing in them, which was not what I expected. And so trial and error on these things for the genetics we have in-house, and then the genetics that are coming on board. And there's some young guys that are doing a lot with DNA now and getting some interesting cultivars and cordyceps growing, and that's on our bucket list, and getting some of those genetics. On the other side of it, we also want to look at the sustainability of agriculture. So by expanding into the hemp and using the statistically, the oak that we have, the red oak, let me see, it takes one acre of hemp equals 30 acres of oak, and it reaches, the oak takes about 30 years to reach that maturation, while the hemp is annual. And so I think that makes a lot more sense there. And then being responsible in regards to when people see the gardens, we have great big gardens here around the farm, that some of them had oil in them. Not because I did an experiment, because well, someone dumped a bunch of oil on my dirt and I had to clean it, and we cleaned it using our compost, and then had it tested. There's no oil in it. So, nothing official, no real study, just, oh, I read that these can clean up oil. And so then we went and did it. However, having the plastic waste, I'd like to have zero waste. And so getting our hands on these genetics and just practicing, doing what a farmer would do at their own place to get these things to kind of work. And then, doing a lot of experiments.
You're developing your own protocols for every type of mushroom that you work with then, and kind of trying to figure out what works best in your particular space?
Yes.
And you're documenting all
as
that.
well as
So
genetics.
when you change strains, you have to figure out what it is that is going to be different.
Well, yes and no. Yes and no. I know that my farm is geared better towards colder weather species. So I can do oysters really well. I can grow kings really well. However, say like shiitake, maitake, the a little bit warmer ones that are a little bit different in regards to what they like the feeling to be. My rooms are very cold and wet, where they're not sort of with fast moving air, where those other ones, may like a moderate temperature with a lot, not a lot of air movement, those sort of things. I'm trying to mimic in those grow rooms, and see if I can get to the grow room picture here. That's the lab. Let's go this way. Okay, that's incubation. And these are all full spectrum grow lights throughout the farm. I actually just had a person from the button or UV company that wanted to sell me UV lights to put vitamin D in my mushrooms post harvest. And I said, my vitamin D is formed under these grow lights during harvest. during their growth. So in this room, you see a tube going down the center of the room. Above that door is a 10-inch line coming in. It is 10 foot wide and 16 foot long and 8 foot tall. It is stick built with OSB and then covered in rubber and then covered with FRP, fiberglass reinforced plastic. This was what was available then. I wouldn't recommend using any of these things.
And what is
There's
that?
carbettes now. Believe it or not, the pressure treated wood, what material that I would recommend different materials that exist now. I didn't know that they existed then. I'm looking at the black on the ceiling, and it's the rubber so that I don't rot everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can see the shelves themselves. Those are actually kind of a neat idea. The shelves are actually 1/2-inch conduit I've got about 3 miles of EMT conduit in this building. Not a lot of wires going through them. So essentially in this room, the blocks that you see, the substrate blocks, little trees here with the mushrooms fruiting from the top, the far sides of those, there's gaps. The plastic hose is pushing humidified air down, hits the floor, and it basically I'm fruiting spherical in a rectangular space. Because I'm really trying to mimic what they like outside. And when you have this amount of oyster mushrooms that really breathe out a lot of CO2, next to that many other mushrooms breathing out that much CO2, it really screws up what your yields can be because, well, no eyes or anything like that. So out in nature, when CO2 levels are higher than the ambient, it's a trigger to elongate the stem. The fruit body says, I'm trapped under leaves or I'm in the hollow of a tree. I'd better elongate my stem.
Mhm.
I don't want to elongate the stems. And so getting as much airflow as possible when we have, say, maybe 6,000 pounds of substrate in a tiny space at once. That's why, again, why so much fresh air needs to come into the room, per hour. And to see.
So
Basically,
is
a
that
lot.
all you have to manage that separately for each type of mushroom that you're
I wish
doing?
there was I don't have a picture of the front of the grow rooms. So in the front of the grow rooms, one of the owners of the farm is a computer guy. He actually is the IT guy for the Mount Washington Observatory. And they had him and his brother-in-law at the time asked me what I needed, and which was I had sensors up from Korea, which were only supposed to be used for a year, and they're still working after 10 years, which is pretty cool in regards to sensors. Measure my relative humidity, my level of CO2, and my temperature, and then I can control all of those things individually and in conjunction with each other, and in conjunction with the other 3 grow rooms, because all of the grow rooms are tied to the same air exchangers. So that also poses a bit of a challenge. That's why, why do blue oysters always go in grow room 4, and why are lion's mane in grow room 2? Because that's the room they'll grow in. And so constantly tweaking things or moving things around or making adjustments happened all the way up until about 2016. So we have computers that run all of the rooms, and I type the parameters we're in, and then they should handle themselves fairly well. But they do need constant monitoring. We're actually just recently were approached by a gentleman from a USDA, a section of the USDA, where they're going to come in and they took all the square footage and energy uses and those sorts of things because, well, I have a 200 amp service that I consistently pull about 189 amps out of 24 hours a day. And my electricity just doubled. And so that made mushrooms a lot more expensive to grow.
You say your
So we're talking,
electricity price
well,
doubled?
now it's justified to put it in. Yeah. I went from, what was it?
10 kilowatts to 22.
10 kilowatts to 22,
Kilowatts.
$1. Oh, $10 a kilowatt to $22 a kilowatt. I know that my bill was $1,900 and then it was $4,200, and my jaw dropped to the floor and went, how long has it been since I paid them? And they realized it was only 30 days. Basically almost every consumable that we buy in the last 2 years has doubled in price, which is why we're trying a lot of different setups. We do everything by hand here still. However, the company Main Cap and Stem, you can see in this center picture here, they have actually developed a soybean hull sawdust pellet and have also designed a open source printable bag feeding system, so everything can be consistent all of the time, and really helping other farmers out to not go through the troubles that we had. in the
Are you
beginning.
doing training for other
Boxes that
people
you saw
who,
somewhere, well, that's where the New Hampshire Mushroom School comes in. I launched a pilot program this summer. It's a 10-day. Hold on. It's a 10-day intensive where it's on-site, hands-on training for people that want to operate their own mushroom farms. And it's not where I'm not teaching people how to, make cultures and make spawn and, just the basics. I'm teaching people like, hey, it's actually wiser for you to purchase spawn if you're making this, or, hey, don't spend $10,000 trying to find fans. Like, this is the type of fan you want. Here's the mist system that you want. See, when we started, there was very little internet information in regards to specialty small farms. All of the videos that we could see were from, say, China or Korea. And so we're trying to take little tiny pieces of that and kind of put it together, some sort of semblance between some sort of semblance from the 3 books that we could read, and doing some of the things really wrong or trying to take them too seriously could get you into a lot of trouble. And so really making a lot of observations. But then there's a whole other side of the business that you can't read in the book or get from the internet, which is, how do I talk to my insurance company that knows nothing about mushroom farms? How do I, make sure that I get the correct workman's comp rate so I don't get listed as like a dairy farm at, 17 to 24 per 100, because I only have one piece of dangerous machinery in the whole place. So making sure getting the right prices on that, how to have your state and local, well, what are the rules in your state? What sort of documentation do you need? A lot of people come to me and be like, man, I want to start a mushroom farm, but like, I don't even know what to do. Like, do I have to sign something to like be able to grow food? And do people come in every day? Not a real knowledge of like how that stuff works. We also cover your demographics of selling, restaurants, farmers markets, wholesale, what you want to do. And really a person goes home with a better understanding of, okay, I came with an idea. Here's the reality of it. Now I can make a better decision based on creating a business plan. I don't know what the accurate figure is. I mean, I've heard that startup mushroom farms, about an 85% failure rate.
Are you consulting mostly with people who are outside of New Hampshire and thinking about starting in other states?
Well, so that's the thing with hiring a GM. He wants me to do the consulting because I've just been doing it for a decade for like free to whoever calls me. Apparently, he told me that's worth money. See how smart it is to have a GM? I get calls from all over the place. I get calls. Main Cap and STEM had started doing a podcast, of which I went on and did. Micro Wizard podcast. If you want to hear a bunch of people that own farms and also have ADHD, go ahead and give them a listen. I think most of them are average about 4 to 6 hours. Once that played, I didn't realize that like thousands of people listen to it. And I get calls from mushroom farmers all over the country. But here's the thing, like I would see their farm and, there's a guy in Oregon that, wow, you really grow some nice hen of the woods. And he says, well, you grow some nice king oysters. You want to trade info? Sure. I did a trial with the lion's mane that he grows. I wasn't sure when to pick it. So I sent him a picture and said, here's your lion's mane. When should I pick it? And so I gave him the trials and he goes, well, your yields on your trials were better than mine. What did you do different? And I told him, and now his yields are doubled. I'm not really in competition with the guy in Oregon.
Right.
And, and then when I worked at the farm a long time ago, they called Foliota adiposa chestnut mushroom. That's why I called it chestnut. I think that Far West Fungi was growing either Nemeko or adiposa and calling it cinnamon cap. So every time I'm on the internet, I see somebody talking about chestnut mushrooms. I know it's been within the last decade, which is kind of cool. Or I see the boxes that are in that picture. I didn't even like the boxes in the industry. I got so frustrated with them trying to find one that would keep specialty mushrooms from getting all beat up that I designed that one myself. And then a lot of mushroom farmers called me because they've been looking for boxes too once they saw it. And I'm like, yeah, I got frustrated, so I made one, and they wanted to buy it.
Mhm.
But there's not a lot of money in small, cardboard. So in 2016, when I was 2,200 pounds a week, I started an outdoor fine dining restaurant, was working on a book, all kinds of things. Let's just say I wanted some financial challenges. And so I decided to lease out royalty rights to the box. And actually, since then, since 2016, I actually buy my own boxes from my competition. It's cheaper for me to do it. But it works. You know what I mean? It works. I mean, who cares? It's a cardboard box. Yeah, it's just one of those things. Let me see. What do we have in
Well,
that next box? Well, the elm that we
sounds
talked
like
about.
it's an industry where people are really trying to figure out how to run these small businesses to start with and developing a lot of technology. Is that what you
I've been
think where
well,
you're
now
at
that we
now?
have, actually, I've got some grad students from Stanford that I've been talking with lately too. They got a bunch of grant money for they want to do something with robotics, but they want to do robotics on this small setting. And so does the guy from the USDA. And so I'm telling them things like, hey, this would be awesome if I did this, or this would be really efficient if I did that. And now they're off talking about things. The guys from Stanford were like, what's this difference between, see, you've got guys that are growing in basements and garages, and they're probably selling at a farmer's market or two, and they're doing great, actually, but a lot of them want to get bigger. Then you have farms that are between, say, the 750 to 2,500 pound a week range that can, distribute, if they're not shipping, to about 150-mile radius. But then there's no middle ground between there and like 10,000 pounds a week. Because at 10,000 pounds a week, you're starting to compete with large button farms that in the 80s, when the button industry kind of fell out, and then a lot of these mushroom houses had specialty mushrooms put into them. And I know the cost to produce specialty mushrooms, and I know the cost they're selling it at, and they're pretty close. So it's hard to compete with trying to sell mushrooms at the same as the cost it takes you to grow them. And so you really have to step it up with quality, so the quality will sell it. And doing that in these small farms, less distribution, more one-on-one. I think it's great for the industry as a whole, even though farmers markets are the most expensive to employ, and it's one of the most intermittent. That's kind of difficult when you're selling wild mushrooms and doing it at farmers markets. I mean, it threatens rain or something, and there go half your sales. Or you needed mushrooms on a Tuesday, but they weren't ready to pick until the Thursday, and now they're a week old. So basically, most of us, we kind of need to know what was happening 12 weeks ago, today, and 12 weeks from now, with all of the millions of mitigating variables that will happen that keep this sort of fluid. So the more communication we can have with people, and now with so much more mushroom information getting out there, that I don't want to say the layman, but people are gathering up. They're asking me questions of things I've been talking about for like a decade, but they're finding them from other sources, and they're coming to me to ask me about them. Where we dug out information.
It sounds like the
that,
lesson is
sort of
if you're going
trying
to get
force feed
into
it to everything
mushroom
to ears,
cultivation,
for
join a growers
sometimes.
group. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of technology that needs to be worked out, and there's a big business
To make it
component
efficiently
to this,
consistent,
independent of
because,
growing.
well, when you have a farm like this, everything is Mickey Mouse. I mean, everything's held together with foil tape and prayer broken so many times I'm going to fix it. And so getting some of these sort of automated systems, I mean, I could get an automated system that I could grow in the space 10 times the amount, but the equipment starts at $1.5 million, and there's no one in this country qualified to work on them. And so how much investment? I mean, that's really wholesale. I mean, so you have to find a balance between what you're producing to how much you can sell. One of the difficulties with wilds, if you're producing hen of the woods, I mean, it's clean, but they're fruiting now. I mean, last year, hens went from $24 a pound retail to $3 a pound retail in 4 days. So you got to be
Wow.
careful how much you buy, because if you bought 1,000 pounds at $10 a pound, and then it only sold for, you know, $4 a pound or $3 a pound a week later, you can really lose a lot of money pretty quick.
Sounds like a tax shelter to me.
Well, you guys, we're right at
we've-
9 o'clock or a little over.
Yeah,
so
you're gonna be, I'll
we-
talk to
wrap
Alex
up and let Eric get on with this evening. But thank you so much for spending your time with us this evening. This has been great. And-
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a little odd looking at pictures of my farm while talking to people
Yep.
in the box. So
Well, it's
kind of a new kind of lecture
interesting to
for me.
hear how
So,
these farms run.
Hopefully,
I
hopefully I didn't
appreciate
repeat
it,
myself.
Eric.
Yeah, we're this one. We're open 7 days a week for retail, and people
Mhm.
come in and walk around all the time. So if anyone's in New Hampshire, you know, I'm here 24/7, and so. Sorry.
Okay, well,
Oh.
everybody, the link to the farm is in the email that I sent out for the introduction.
Which is in a
if you
constant
happen
state of
to take a
construction.
Vacation up there. Sounds like it'd be an interesting place to walk around.
I'm not muted, am I? It really is. Or just go for a walk. I've been able to get trained by some really great mycologists. I've got Dr. Rick Vanderpool, who's was a teacher and then a mentor and now a really close friend. And then for our Can You Eat It classes, Noah Siegel comes every year and does one. And so we find out what adventures he's been on throughout the year, and you know, just learning stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Well,
awesome.
that's great.
Yeah. So, you know, but as
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
pleasure talking with
we'll,
everybody, and have a great night.
I certainly, if I come up there, I'm going to take a walk through, see what's going on up there.
Yeah, with what we named the farm, I mean, really, if you just type in any sort of combination of mushroom and New Hampshire, any sort of combo, like we're gonna be on the first 6 pages. It was by accident, but I tell people now it was a business decision because I don't pay Google anything. Stop listening to me, Google.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you
Okay.
again. Good night, you guys.
Thanks.
Take care, folks.
Good night.
Bye.